Oh, we're so sorry to hear about your brother that passed away. He gets 5 big booms. Boom! 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 Boom!
I don't usually make videos about horror movies, but it's Halloween, and we got ourselves a banger to talk about today. Battle Royale is an incredibly controversial 2000 film by Kinji Fukasaku. And by the way, if I pronounce any of these names wrong, I don't care. But today, unfortunately, I will be adding to that controversy, not by exploring the film's depiction of schoolchildren being brutally murdered, but instead through a claim which I have found to be far more repulsive. Mitsuko, one of the main antagonists of the film, fits a majority of the criteria for the final girl archetype. Yes, the one who is by all means a sociopath and is responsible for killing half a dozen of her classmates, is a final girl. Not only that, but Mitsuko's depiction in the film is that of an empowered female. She doesn't fall into the same trap as many other final girls of appealing to the male gaze and scopophilic fantasies. Therefore, not only is Mitsuko a final girl, but her character is a rare representation of an empowered female in that archetype. I'll explain everything I mean because I know that was a lot of information to throw at you. But firstly, if you have no idea what a final girl even is, like me before making this video, then let me catch you up real quick. The final girl is a character in a horror film, usually a female, who is the last survivor and confronts and defeats the antagonist, usually a slasher villain. Think Laurie Strode from Halloween. There are a bunch of typical characteristics associated with the final girl, which we'll get into in a second. And now that we're all caught up, let's get back to the video. Even though I consider Mitsuko to be a final girl, like most who fit the archetype, she doesn't fit every single element. First of all, and probably most importantly, spoilers by the way, she dies. She doesn't make it to the end of the film. She dies midway through the third act of Battle Royale. However, like we've seen with a film like Les Diaboliques, we can have a final girl archetype who doesn't explicitly survive the runtime of the movie. Also, 2 videos in a row I'm talking about Les Diaboliques. It's gotta be a record. Second, while most final girl characters are supposed to behave asexually or modest in their sexuality, Mitsuko is the complete opposite of that. Throughout the film, she is called out for being a whore and frequently uses her sexuality to her advantage, as we can infer when she kills these 2 gentlemen over here. However, I would still make the argument that Mitsuko isn't sexually active in the same way as some other characters. She uses her sexuality as a way to exert her control over others. She doesn't seem to have the capacity to form emotional connections or feel that much in general, so her promiscuousness is more of a means to an end. There's a sense of strategy to it, so it differs from the female victims of Tenebrae, for instance, who most likely engage in the sexual acts for the reason you'd expect. Finally, Mitsuko isn't the intended main protagonist of the film. Her first scene isn't until like half an hour in, and she has significantly less screen time than Shuya and Noriko. However, I don't consider this to be a deal breaker either. Hamlet, for example, is not a horror film, but rather a play from like the 1600s or some shit. But nevertheless, even though he's a dude, I would classify Horatio as a final girl. In case you are not familiar with the story, which would make sense because it was written hundreds of years before my GOAT LeBron carried a team of plumbers to the NBA Finals. Horatio in the play was not a main character, nor did he drive the plot. He also wasn't responsible for defeating the villain of the story. Therefore, a final girl does not always have to be the protagonist, or even a girl. While Mitsuko doesn't fit some of the most obvious elements of final girl, she does fit the archetype in ways that are more important. One criteria of the final girl is athleticism. Mitsuko not only exhibits acrobatics in some of her kills, but she's also able to handle gun recoil. When Mitsuko shoots a gun, we commonly get a close-up shot of her and her victim, and the quick editing makes it appear as though the recoil has no effect on her at all. If you've never fired a gun before, just know that this would require a lot of physical strength, especially for a female. A second characteristic of the final girl is her exhibiting traditionally masculine traits. When Mitsuko kills her classmates, she is completely indifferent. At times, the filmmakers choose not to even show her killing and just the aftermath. This highlights just how unemotional Mitsuko is by implying that killing her friends was so unimportant to her that it wasn't even worth showing. Mitsuko being emotionally unavailable and having few emotional connections is a typically masculine trait in films, even if that film stereotype is not indicative of the real world at all, at least in my experience. Thirdly, strategic thinking and the ability to think ahead is commonly associated with the final girl. Mitsuko is very able to think ahead and, as stated before, is able to use her sexuality to her advantage and manipulate the emotions of others to gain the upper hand. For example, when she starts crying in front of Shimizu Shih Tzu before her second kill, it allows her the split second she needs to gain the upper hand. Fourthly, the final girl is usually very aware of her surroundings and uses her environment to her advantage. Mitsuko is very aware of her surroundings and immediately goes into fight or flight mode once the situation is made clear to her. She uses her elements to her advantage, using the element of surprise and using the foliage as cover when she kills Likewise, when she kills Komodo Dragon, she does so by sneaking up and gunning her down. The final girl is supposed to be the character which elicits the most emotion out of the viewer, which is the case with Mitsuko, because whenever she's on the screen, you know something's about to go down. The director stylistically uses her presence alone to elicit anxiety or fear out of the viewer. Mitsuko also meets, in my opinion, the most important aspect of Final Girl. Like most Final Girls, Mitsuko is more of an outsider. She doesn't fit in with the other kids. This is shown during the epilogue in the last scene of the basketball game. Film is a visual medium, and in this scene, the director uses stylistic tools to show how Mitsuko is the outlier within the class. We get a shot from her point of view of everyone celebrating together, combined with a wide shot of her leaving the gym alone. Another characteristic of the final girl is being able to evince anxiety in a way that sets her apart from other characters. This is true for Mitsuko, since she only ever shows emotion when she's faking it. In the scene when she kills Shimizu, the filmmakers make it abundantly clear that Mitsuko only shows emotion when she's trying to use it to take advantage of someone. In that sense, the way she showcases her emotion sets her apart from other characters. I see the final girl archetype simply as the outlier in the group of characters in the film. Obviously, there's the aspect of the final girl typically being the only one to survive, but the final girl also stands out in other ways. These can range from being less promiscuous or more androgynous than the other people around her, but no matter what, the final girl always stands alone, away from her group, and Mitsuko is a great example of this. And as a final girl, Mitsuko doesn't fall into the category of that trope which appeals to the male gaze. Instead, she is more of an empowered feminist. Please don't laugh. The most notable example of this comes right before Mitsuko's death when we see a flashback of her childhood. In a film which shows children within my age bracket getting their heads blown off by suicide callers, this is probably the hardest scene to watch. Although, this scene is necessary because it not only gives us more insight into the world of the film, but it wordlessly gives us insight into Mitsuko's character as an empowered feminist. Also, this scene is kinda accurate to showing how certain sociopathic tendencies can develop in children. The way it's directed when Mitsuko runs from the man, as almost a chase scene, implies that Mitsuko and her mom have been sexually assaulted by this man either successfully or unsuccessfully in the past. However, when Mitsuko summons the courage to push the man down the stairs, this is representative of her conquering the masculine figure which is trying to dominate her. Furthermore, the shot the director shows of Mitsuko at the top of the stairs, looking down apathetically, indicates that this incident taught her that she had to fight for herself to survive. I interpreted this scene as an empowered feminist, quite literally killing the masculine force which has tried to impose his will over her, which directly rejects the aspects of the male gaze which so many final girls fall victim to. Mitsuko also never falls into the trap of scopophilic fantasies. Scopophilia is the voyeuristic pleasure derived from looking at an object or person. Typically, a final girl character, especially those in older films, will be a vessel for certain scopophilic fantasies, like those scenes when the killer is stalking the main character and we get his POV, that kind of stuff. However, this is not the case with Mitsuko as a result of her being an empowered female character. Mitsuko is always in control of the situation up until her death. For example, she is never being stalked by a killer. Instead, she is the one doing the stalking. Even her death scene, the only time Mitsuko is not in control, is just not at all what a scopophilic fantasy is, despite it being slightly over the top. Okay, maybe very over the top. Although she departs from several fundamental tropes of the final girl, Mitsuko is still classified as a final girl due to the rest of the credentials which she fits. Additionally, while so many final girls fall into the trap of being a vessel for male gaze and scopophilia, Mitsuko instead takes on the role of an empowered feminist within the narrative. And her fitting these multiple archetypes, being both a slasher and a final girl, both an empowered female and a sociopathic murderer, is why she's such a great character. And you know, this is facts, not my opinion, whatever, you know the drill. Anyway, that's all I got for you today, fellas. I hope you learned as much while watching this video as I did while making it. Thank you for your time, and God bless.
Irving drives to James, misses the jam, but fouled.